She gasped softly, letting out breathy moans as the intense sensations began to overwhelm her. He asked how it felt as she cried out again, utterly lost in the overwhelming rhythm. Submitting completely to the heat of the moment, she whispered that he could release within her. Panting heavily, he showed her trembling form that with him she could experience the absolute limits. Completely overwhelmed by the passionate embrace, she admitted she had never felt anything like this before. Wondering how things reached this point, she listened as he vowed to make her body understand. Snapping back to reality, Mishiro heard a coworker urgently asking if she saw last month's sales results. The bustling office erupted as coworkers eagerly urged each other to check the surprisingly early postings. Glaring at the board, the ambitious woman gritted her teeth and lamented losing again by a tiny margin. Meanwhile, her rival stood nearby and dismissively muttered that his victory was absolutely nothing special. Coworkers flocked to Kuroshiro, showering the brooding man with praise for his consistently amazing sales results. Slumping in sheer defeat, Mishiro felt completely crushed by the undeniable reality of the new rankings. Vowing they should just watch her, she furiously wondered why that unfriendly diva always beat her perfect smile. Trembling with frustration, she fumed that his aloof and uninterested expression completely pissed her off. Mocking his stuck-up attitude and dismissive words, she fiercely declared her mission to defeat Kuroshiro. Burning with intense competitive fire, she swore she was absolutely going to knock him off first place. Later at the welcoming party, the energetic staff raised their glasses and cheered to the new hire's success. The host enthusiastically introduced Kuroshiro as the undefeated ace alongside his fellow new hire Mishiro. Clinking his glass, a colleague cheerfully told Mishiro to ask him anything if she was unsure. Flashing a brilliant and sparkling smile, Mishiro brightly announced that it was nice to meet everyone. The air practically sparkled around her as she charmed the entire room with her radiant presence. Watching the crowd fawn over her rival, Mishiro angrily wondered why a guy like him was so popular. She bitterly recalled breaking up with her trashy ex so she could finally focus on her work. Wanting to avoid further humiliation, she cringed as adoring coworkers begged the amazing Kuroshiro for his sales tips. Forcing down her drink, Mishiro grimaced at the taste of beer just as someone suddenly called her name. Dreading the sudden pivot to office romance, she internally panicked when asked about things with Sasaki. Bracing herself for their shocked reactions, Mishiro awkwardly confessed that she and Sasaki actually broke up last week. Deflecting their murmurs about him being a nice guy, she vaguely explained that a lot of things happened. Her coworker apologized for asking something so personal while encouraging her to just drink and forget it. Across the bustling room, a loud and obnoxious voice suddenly rang out aggressively complaining about his ex. Sasaki loudly complained to his drinking buddies that his former partner never reacted passionately to him. Cruelly mocking her lack of physical response, he sneered that he never would have dated such a frigid woman. Roaring with cruel laughter, Sasaki viciously insulted Mishiro by calling her entirely lifeless and unmoving in bed. Shocked by the nasty outburst, her colleagues awkwardly told her not to let the terrible drunk get to her. Clutching her glass tightly, Mishiro fought back tears and silently admitted that the vicious public insults still hurt. Suddenly slicing through the heavy tension of the room, a cold and commanding voice interrupted the cruel laughter. Stepping forward fearlessly, Kuroshiro coldly deduced aloud that Sasaki's complaints merely proved his own glaring physical inadequacies. Staring down the stunned bully, Kuroshiro firmly declared that the lack of passion was absolutely not Mishiro's fault. Closing the distance, Kuroshiro sharply noted that Sasaki constantly blamed others whenever his private or professional endeavors failed. Seething with utter humiliation and speechless rage, the exposed Sasaki could only glare and curse the icy newcomer. Glaring with cold intensity, Kuroshiro issued a chilling warning that Sasaki would deeply regret his actions. Shocked by the unexpected outburst, cheering colleagues excitedly praised Kuroshiro for shouting so fiercely like that. Laughing off the unexpected drama, enthusiastic coworkers urged Rin not to hold back and drink more. Cheering loudly, the crowd watched as Kuroshiro suddenly reached out and demanded she give it over. Taking her drink away, Kuroshiro gently told her that she did not have to force herself. Lifting the glass to his lips, he smoothly downed the entire beverage in one quick gulp. Slamming the empty glass down, Kuroshiro maintained a perfectly calm and collected demeanor despite the alcohol. Staring at him in awe, Mishiro silently realized that although Kuroshiro was blunt, he was considerate. Recalling how he helped her earlier, she warmly concluded that he might actually be a decent guy. Sitting together later, Mishiro noted it was good they headed the same way to split fare. Expressing her gratitude for everything, she watched him quietly brush off her thanks as absolutely nothing. Feeling emotionally vulnerable in the quiet taxi, Mishiro gently asked if she could vent a little. Opening up completely, she confessed that he was her first boyfriend and she initially felt happy. Explaining their loveless dynamic without real dates, she admitted she slowly lost feelings wondering about love. Trembling with lingering hurt, she revealed he cruelly dumped her by blaming her for not finishing. Drowning in painful self-doubt, Mishiro sadly admitted she kept wondering if it was all her fault. Sighing in defeat, the heartbroken woman confessed that in the end she could not say anything. Filled with heavy regret, Mishiro firmly stated that she should have been the one dumping him. Cursing her own past foolishness, she bitterly lamented that she was such a completely naive idiot. Panicking suddenly, Mishiro hurriedly apologized because he probably did not want to hear sad coworker drama. Glancing over at her quiet companion, she noticed Kuroshiro was sound asleep with soft snoring sounds. Feeling a sudden wave of relief, Mishiro whispered that it was a good thing he finally slept. Wiping away a stray tear in the dark, she let out a quiet and lonely sniff. Waking up in an unfamiliar room, a groggy Kuroshiro sleepily called out for Mishiro in confusion. Remembering a quick flash of an earlier apology, Mishiro flusteredly stated she would return to work. Flashing back to a grateful moment, a smiling Mishiro sincerely thanked Kuroshiro for his earlier help. Startled, fully awake by the glaring sunlight, he suddenly realized where he was resting his head. Peeking into the quiet room, Mishiro softly called out his name to see if he awoke. Groaning quietly as he sat up, Kuroshiro groggily acknowledged Mishiro as she stood near the doorway. Teasing him playfully, Mishiro grumbled loudly that his sleeping body was just way too incredibly heavy. Complaining about dragging him from the taxi, Mishiro jokingly asked if he was a lightweight too. Softening her tone affectionately, she acknowledged he drank for her sake and settled what she owed. Preparing to leave, she casually announced she would lock up and drop the mailbox key outside. Stepping away quickly, Mishiro gasped in sudden surprise as Kuroshiro swiftly reached out to grab her. Letting out a startled shriek, the shocked woman suddenly lost her balance as he forcefully pulled. Crashing directly onto the soft bed, Mishiro stared up in wide-eyed silence at the looming man. Pinning her gently against the mattress, Kuroshiro quietly asked if she was okay under his weight. Flustered by their intense physical proximity, Mishiro desperately stammered out a panicked plea to just wait. Staring deeply into her eyes, Kuroshiro pressed his body overwhelmingly close in a heated romantic silence. Burning with sudden overwhelming embarrassment, Mishiro frantically thought there was no way this was actually happening. Flustered and completely overwhelmed, she stammered in absolute shock at the incredibly impressive size before her. Heavy silence hung in the tension-filled air as her wide eyes took in the breathtaking sight. Panicking wildly, she desperately tried denying the overwhelming situation while frantically questioning his sudden bold motives. Observing her completely flustered state, he quietly noted that her incredibly telling reaction completely gave her away. Flashing a highly confident smirk, he smoothly pointed out that his daring assumptions were entirely correct. Utterly bewildered by his shockingly sudden remark, she could only let out a breathless, confused gasp. He firmly reassured her that her terrible ex's cruel words about their intimate failures were completely baseless. Staring deeply into her mesmerized eyes, he confidently declared his completely unwavering intention to properly prove it. Frantically wondering if he heard her secret taxi confession, she fiercely denied his bold, impossible claim. Moving forward with incredibly smooth, deliberate intention, he whispered that he would warmly show her exactly how. Her fragile heart raced completely wildly as she nervously questioned what his incredibly daring sudden movements meant. Shifting significantly closer, he gently noted that their distinctly awkward current position simply would not do whatsoever. Desperately attempting to rationalize his uncharacteristically bold behavior, she nervously accused the man of being heavily intoxicated. Calmly admitting his own heavy intoxication, he pressed onward while she internally fought the intense rising temptation. Despite knowing she should fiercely resist his gentle questioning only made her breathless emotional surrender feel inevitable. Carefully noting her highly undeniable physical response, his husky deep voice pointed out how incredibly ready she was. Overwhelmed entirely by the rapidly escalating heat, she breathlessly admitted that her racing mind felt completely clouded. Panting incredibly softly, she felt an intense wave building as he soothingly urged her to completely let go. Their feverish bodies pressed tightly together as the overwhelmingly powerful surge of passionate warmth finally took over completely. Dazed and violently trembling in the heated aftermath, she wondrously questioned if this was the elusive ultimate release. Stubbornly denying her undeniable glorious climax, she helplessly trembled as he softly teased her blatantly obvious physical reactions. Gasping incredibly sharply, she frantically braced herself for the overwhelmingly intense sensation of his deep and undeniable closeness. Hovering highly intimately close, he smugly whispered how beautifully responsive she instantly became from a simple deep kiss. Leaning forward with an incredibly confident and highly knowing smirk, he softly challenged her weak and breathless denials. Dropping his smooth voice to a thrillingly husky register, he dangerously proposed a highly intimate, thrilling little competition. Framing his bold new challenge gently, he promised this intensely passionate trial would finally erase her lingering painful insecurities. Raising the intimate stakes to an impossibly high number, he boldly dared her to beautifully reach the ultimate peak. With fiery burning determination shining in his eyes, he solemnly vowed to demonstrate how deeply she truly deserved devotion. Sealing his intensely passionate promise, he solemnly vowed to intimately rewrite every agonizing lingering doubt directly into her soul. The scene opened with a tense silence as anticipating hearts raced in the quiet space. She gasped in utter disbelief and vehemently denied the intense situation by claiming there was absolutely no way. Overwhelmed by the intense atmosphere, she frantically thought there was no way she could possibly proceed. He confidently assured her that she would understand everything completely once she truly felt it. Moving closer, he softly promised that from here on out they would take things nice and slow. Panicking under his fiery gaze, she cried out that she simply could not handle this. Chuckling darkly, he teasingly questioned who had ever said he was going to take things that far. Flustered by his brazen words, she stammered that he had not explicitly said it but still implied it. Staring intensely, he firmly declared that there was an established order to how things must progress. Completely shifting the charge dynamic, he boldly suggested that they should go on a date. She froze in pure shock and was completely stunned into silence by his incredibly unexpected proposition. Sputtering about the ridiculous situation, she frantically questioned who else a date with him could possibly involve. Trembling with anxious energy, she completely lost her words as her mind spiraled entirely out of control. Throwing her hands up, she dramatically wailed into the void, demanding to know exactly why this was happening. On the day of the date, she rationalized it was just food while wondering how it came to this. Tossing things around her room in frustration, she furiously berated her past self as an idiot for saying yes. Realizing it was always just company parties, she noted this might actually be their first one-on-one meal as co-workers. Deciding she meant nothing by it, she prepared just in case since she could not break a promise. Rummaging through her closet, she anxiously muttered that she needed to dress appropriately to match Kuroshiro's outfit. Groaning over her choices, she humorously started a Kuroshiro outfit slot machine spinning wildly in her head. Imagining various stylish scenarios, her mind raced endlessly through every possible clothing combination he might wear. Continuing to overthink the encounter, she visualized him looking impossibly sharp in every conceivable casual style. Reminding herself this was just a meal, she desperately tried ignoring thoughts about this morning or that time. Snapping out of her thoughts, she suddenly spotted him and breathlessly called out Kuroshiro's name in utter surprise. Standing there looking impossibly cool, he impatiently commanded her to hurry up and join him. Clutching her racing heart, she defensively shouted that more importantly he had completely scared her. Looking closer at his casual clothes for the first time, she internally admitted that he was actually incredibly hot. Flustered when he asked if something was on his face, she hastily stuttered that it was absolutely nothing. Shrugging off her weird behavior, he casually stated it was fine and asked if she wanted to go inside. Catching her completely off guard once again, he smoothly revealed that he had already made a reservation. Staring at the building in shock, she gasped and wondered aloud if this was the exact place she thought. Gazing upward, she realized in awe it was Puru and Mellow, the super popular pancake place. Remembering a past conversation, she realized excitedly that this was the exact place she had told the girls about. Hearing he just disliked waiting in line, she internally marveled at how impossibly smooth this guy was. Clenching her fists in defeat, she despairingly wondered why she felt like she had completely lost this unspoken battle. Following him inside the cheerful cafe, she silently admitted that his thoughtful preparation was still incredibly surprising. Watching his broad back, She marveled at the fact that he actually made reservations for cute places like this. Suddenly brimming with excitement, she eagerly pointed across the room and told Kuroshiro to look over there. Staring in absolute wonder at the massive pancakes, she enthusiastically squealed about how incredibly jiggly they were. Leaning in with shining eyes, she happily proclaimed that the delicious treats were even bigger than in the photos. Letting out a sudden shriek, Mishiro stumbled back as something caught her completely off guard. Staring in stunned silence, they remained completely frozen while trying to process the unexpected moment. Floating in a surprisingly soft and bouncy atmosphere, an unspoken tension lingered gently between them. Maintaining an intense quiet, the two continued to silently observe the slightly awkward situation unfolding. Breaking the heavy silence, Kuroshiro bluntly remarked that she acted exactly like a real dog. Utterly bewildered by the strange comparison, Mishiro confusedly questioned what he exactly meant by that. Pointing out her completely obvious puppy-like demeanor, he coolly told the stunned woman to look. Reacting to his teasing gesture, Mishiro flusteredly panicked as he suddenly captured the embarrassing moment. Angrily protesting his sneaky actions, she loudly demanded that he immediately delete the unauthorized photograph. Smoothly dodging her frantic grabs, Kuroshiro effortlessly lifted the phone high out of her reach. Shifting the topic entirely, Kuroshiro calmly brought up their intense sales contest from the other day. Holding the photo hostage, he smugly proposed that he would reconsider only if she won. Desperately arguing that the contest was cancelled, Mishiro accused him of being drunk back then. Ignoring her frantic protests entirely, Kuroshiro smoothly questioned if she was okay with the date. Flustering completely at his casual implication, she loudly insisted that their outing was definitely not a date. Trying to hide her rapidly beating heart, she let out a quiet sigh of lingering frustration. Glancing at his unbothered profile, Mishiro internally noted that Kuroshiro was significantly harder to read today. Recalling their fun animal cafe visit, she excitedly praised how amazingly fluffy the experience actually was. Walking hesitantly beside the quiet man, Mishiro nervously pondered the reality of going out together. Second-guessing her spontaneous decision entirely, Mishiro internally worried that agreeing to this was a huge mistake. Suddenly breaking her anxious train of thought, Kuroshiro pointedly directed her attention toward her foot. Apologizing awkwardly for her poorly fitting heels, she embarrassingly admitted she had forgotten they hurt. Pausing his confident stride immediately, Kuroshiro silently crouched down toward her painful and blistered feet. Without saying a single word, he carefully began to inspect her sore heels with surprising gentleness. Reaching into his dark coat pocket, Kuroshiro effortlessly pulled out a small and practical first aid supply. Stunned by his incredible preparedness, Mishiro frantically wondered if she was completely losing in girl power. Breaking her internal panic with a soft hum, Kuroshiro quietly acknowledged her totally shocked reaction. Swiftly handling the tiny bandage, he prepared to carefully apply the adhesive directly over her blister. Gasping softly in sudden surprise, Mishiro felt her face flush hotly at his incredibly intimate care. Recalling how he firmly insisted, she mentally noted that he made her sit down despite her refusals. Feeling hopelessly flustered by the overwhelming attention, she nervously watched him tend to her aching foot. Trying to suppress a startled gasp, she internally panicked over his incredibly gentle and lingering touch. Completely overwhelmed by the romantic tension, Mishiro frantically questioned what this wildly intimate situation even was. Scolding her with a surprisingly gentle tone, Kuroshiro firmly stated she should have changed them sooner. Processing his incredibly practical advice in silence, Mishiro stared down at him with wide and blinking eyes. Pouting slightly at his totally unexpected scolding, she stubbornly wondered if this was a lecture now. Curiously recalling their very first painful encounter, she softly asked if he always carried bandages around. Shocked that he actually noticed her past struggles, she shyly admitted she used to get blisters frequently. Explaining his surprisingly thoughtful foresight, Kuroshiro calmly revealed he figured her painful shoe problem might happen again. Touched by his secretly observant and caring nature, Mishiro quietly trailed off while feeling a lingering warmth. Realizing a hidden truth, she warmly mused how Kuroshiro actually pays careful attention despite seeming utterly indifferent. Staring silently at the breathtaking scenery ahead, the peaceful moments stretched on beautifully without a single spoken word. Suddenly a sharp gasp of sheer surprise escaped her lips as an unexpected distraction abruptly broke the quiet. Startled completely by the commotion, her eyes widened dramatically at the sudden and chaotic flurry of startling movement. Watching the frantic flapping, she let out a breathless sound of astonishment as the energetic birds swarmed closer. Standing amidst the chaotic flurry, he braced himself against the overwhelmingly sudden and highly chaotic feathery avian assault. Laughing uncontrollably at him freaking out over the pecking pigeons, she gleefully ordered him not to feed them. Clutching her deeply aching stomach, she hilariously asked if anyone managed to capture that incredibly amusing funny moment. Smiling fondly, she cheerfully reasoned that despite his incredibly blunt nature, spending time with Kuroshiro was actually fun. Grumbling playfully that those were definitely not edible treats, he begrudgingly endured the hilariously chaotic little bird encounter. Glancing up warmly at the beautifully dimming sky, she wondrously noted how evening had somehow already arrived perfectly. Admitting she had genuinely laughed for the first time in ages, he stubbornly refused to forgive the pigeons. Turning back, she fondly noted his unusually expressive face vastly contrasted his permanently grumpy professional workplace demeanor. Breaking her wandering thoughts entirely, his deep gentle voice suddenly inquired if her injured foot was feeling all right. Apologizing softly for causing him any undue trouble, she gratefully reassured the caring man that she was fine. Sighing softly in complete disbelief, he gently scolded her for immediately blaming herself once again for absolutely everything. Looking back fondly, he reminded her how she previously claimed to be perfectly fine before crying entirely alone. Laughing off the embarrassingly distant memory, she awkwardly questioned if such a highly emotional event had actually happened. Staring deeply into her eyes, he gently noted that her frustrating old habit of laughing things off remained. Taken entirely off guard by his sudden and intense gaze, she breathlessly whispered his name in absolute shock. Confessing his deeply lingering frustration, he quietly admitted how helpless he had frustratingly felt back during that time. Stepping closer with intense burning resolve, he firmly declared his passionate intention to finally do something this time. A deeply heavy silence stretched beautifully between them as the intensely heavy emotional atmosphere slowly settled in completely. Bringing up his incredibly bold past proposition, he slowly mentioned his passionate wager regarding their intense physical intimacy. A sudden jolt of intense nervous energy rushed violently through her trembling body at his daring intimate words. Closing the gap entirely, he smoothly leaned in closer to deliver an incredibly soft and intensely passionate kiss. Whispering warmly against her soft lips, he fiercely promised to follow their intimate romantic arrangement with perfect precision. Letting the intensely heavy romantic anticipation hang beautifully in the air, he softly trailed off into meaningful silence. Panicking slightly at the escalating intense physical closeness, she frantically begged him to halt his sudden forward advance. Completely overwhelmed by the dizzying rapid progression, she wildly questioned what exactly was happening to her racing heart. A heavy dragging sensation completely overtook her tired limbs as the overwhelming physical exhaustion heavily settled in perfectly. Sighing heavily into the silent room, she breathlessly confessed feeling utterly exhausted from the overwhelmingly intense romantic encounters. Pondering the passionate events silently, she timidly admitted the intense physical closeness was not entirely an unpleasant experience. Remembering his shockingly earnest romantic confession, she gently mulled over his incredibly sincere and deeply passionate heartfelt words. Glaring directly at the deeply embarrassing glowing digital message, she sharply focused on the highly incriminating visual proof. Resolving firmly to erase the deeply embarrassing photographic evidence, she fiercely vowed to make him delete it completely. The incredibly heated and deeply passionate romantic tension flared instantly back to life, filling the wonderfully intimate room. Pressing sweet burning kisses against her skin, he smoothly ignored her frantic pleas to fiercely stop the overwhelming advances. Leaning undeniably closer with intense burning desire, he breathlessly promised just a beautifully little more deeply passionate connection. Trembling helplessly under his overwhelmingly expert touch, she frantically begged the relentless man to graciously halt his movements. Smirking highly confidently, he huskily noted that her trembling heated body was undeniably begging him not to stop. Crying out in sheer breathless ecstasy, she wildly surrendered completely to the overwhelmingly powerful surge of intense passion. Reminding her of past romantic failures, he smugly bragged about repeatedly bringing her purely blissful and melting satisfaction. Staring intently into her dazed lovely eyes, he intensely demanded if she fully understood his deeply unspoken meaning. Gasping incredibly softly, she marveled entirely at the overwhelmingly powerful and highly imposing physical presence pressing against her. Sealing their undeniably intense romantic bond completely, he firmly declared that she would officially become his beloved girlfriend. as the lingering tension heavily permeates the incredibly thick air. Panicking over the sudden intimacy, she cried out that she was absolutely not ready for this. Leaning in incredibly close, he confidently declared that he would simply start directly with her body. Bracing herself for the intense connection, she gasped softly as the passionate warmth slowly enveloped her. Flushed and entirely overwhelmed, she completely surrendered to the breathtaking intensity of their deeply heated embrace. Jolting awake in absolute confusion, she breathlessly wondered what in the world had just happened to her. Touching her flushed face, she desperately reassured herself that the incredibly vivid experience was merely a dream. Glancing around the room frantically, she realized she dozed off and urgently checked the current time. Staring intensely at the glaring alarm clock, she realized with a sudden start that it was already 7. Staring ahead in sheer disbelief, she frantically stammered for everything in the room to just wait a second. Gripping her bed sheets tightly, she completely lost her words as the shocking realization finally fully hit her. Blushing furiously, she admitted in utter disbelief that the dream version of Kuroshiro actually completely aroused her. Burying her deeply burning face, she silently agonized over having such a shamelessly vivid dream right at dawn. Trembling nervously, she realized she was even more aware of him since he declared his absolute seriousness. Slapping her cheeks forcefully, she desperately demanded herself to push away those thoughts and focus completely on work. Suddenly breaking her deep concentration at the busy office, a familiar commanding voice firmly called out her name. Leaning firmly over her desk, he abruptly handed her some documents while coldly noting she was missing old data. Jumping slightly in her comfortable seat, she gasped in pure shock at his incredibly sudden and close proximity. Completely flustered by his abrupt and sudden appearance, she let out a breathless and bewildered yelp of surprise. Staring up at his perfectly stoic expression, she found herself entirely frozen under his incredibly intense and unreadable gaze. Watching him work meticulously, she internally marveled in sheer confusion over how completely normal he was currently acting. Panicking over his heavily suffocating proximity, she squeaked nervously as he calmly instructed her to carefully use the files. While he calmly mentioned sorting the data, she frantically wondered if their recent weekend outing was merely a dream. Maintaining his strictly professional tone, he commanded her to finish everything today before his early fieldwork tomorrow morning. Grinding her teeth in absolute annoyance, she frustratingly noted that the perpetually busy man always slightly looked down on her. Glancing quickly over at his rapidly retreating back, a sudden lingering thought completely interrupted her simmering workplace frustration. Flipping slowly through the perfectly sorted documents, she stared silently at the undeniable proof of his incredibly meticulous assistance. Remembering past difficult struggles and repeatedly dropped files, she suddenly realized that he might have secretly helped her tremendously. Rethinking her past foolish assumptions, she regretfully admitted thinking he was just showing her up because she could never win. Recalling when the stubborn copier suddenly jammed, she realized he had magically appeared out of nowhere to thoroughly fix it. Overhearing incredibly loud and gossiping coworkers nearby, she tuned in as they excitedly discussed Kuroshiro visiting their department earlier. Giggling completely uncontrollably, the deeply smitten female staff enthusiastically swooned over how incredibly smooth his recent actions had truly been. Praising his remarkably reliable nature, they excitedly agreed that happily dating the #1 employee would be absolutely wonderful. Sighing dreamily over the dangerous allure of a cold guy acting nice, they desperately wished for his romantic invitations. Freezing entirely in her tracks, she suddenly realized those vivid romantic scenarios perfectly mirrored her own exact current situation. Recalling his bold past words, she nervously questioned her rapidly racing heart and wondered if she was truly falling. Vehemently denying any possible romantic feelings for Kuroshiro, she was abruptly interrupted by an incredibly loud and sudden thud. Tripping completely awkwardly over her own feet, she let out a terrified shriek as she tumbled violently toward the floor. Catching her breath in sheer panic, she thoroughly realized just how incredibly close she had come to a disastrous fall. Brushing off the frantic concerns about her clumsy stumble, she quickly and firmly insisted that she was completely fine. Panicking internally, Mishiro desperately wondered if he said those romantic things to other girls too. Hearing someone call her name, she immediately panicked and thought that this was absolutely not okay. Screaming internally, she horrifyingly imagined someone accusing her of sleeping her way to the very top. Feeling her heart racing intensely to 100, she gripped her head in absolute, overwhelming distress. Sitting in heavy silence, she stared blankly ahead while struggling to process her spiraling anxious thoughts. Gripping her bandaged hand tightly, she lowered her gaze in a moment of deep, quiet vulnerability. Recalling her cut finger, she stubbornly insisted she hated hearing those doubts because she entirely trusted him. Remembering his gentle words, she softly recalled how he said he wanted to do something deeply meaningful. Reflecting on Kuroshiro's words, she tenderly realized that his confession truly did not feel like a lie. Doubting her own conflicted heart, she nervously admitted that maybe she just did not want to disbelieve him. Sighing heavily in the empty office, she frustratedly complained about working overtime again strictly because of Kuroshiro. Recalling his harsh critique, she remembered him analyzing her narrow target and advising her to strictly listen more. Groaning softly, she bitterly admitted he was not wrong despite him shutting down her every single argument. Hearing the office door suddenly open, she groaned internally upon realizing that it was absolutely exactly Kuroshiro. Greeting her casually with good work, he calmly asked about overtime while she furiously blamed him completely. Stunned by his sudden shift, she gasped as he calmly admitted her meeting approach actually worked beautifully. Meeting his intense gaze, she stood completely frozen in shock as the heavy silence fiercely stretched between them. Calling her name softly, he calmly listened as she angrily yelled that he should have absolutely said that earlier. Staring deeply at her, he quietly explained that wanting to intensely win naturally made a person far more serious. Blushing furiously at his observation, she defensively demanded to strictly know what his incredibly perceptive statement actually meant. Pressing forward intensely, he firmly commanded her to always give her all and strictly not run until she won. Trembling with fiery determination, she passionately declared that she was completely done approaching this fierce rivalry entirely half-heartedly. Flustered by his overwhelming presence, she angrily sputtered that he absolutely could not just say such wild things easily. Collapsing into her chair after he suddenly left, she let out a massive trembling breath of pure utter exhaustion. Staring at her glowing monitor, she resolutely decided to perfectly fix her work slightly to completely avoid his harsh picking. Gasping loudly in sudden sheer realization, her eyes went incredibly wide as a very strictly crucial forgotten detail fiercely struck her. Panicking over her messy desk, she frantically realized that she had completely forgotten to strictly return his specifically borrowed USB. Relieved that she noticed in time, she rapidly remembered he was out visiting important clients the entire strictly next day. Hitting send on her phone, she stubbornly resolved to bring it over late because he previously beautifully helped her. Receiving his blunt text demanding her precise address, she watched in sheer shock as he strictly offered to come instead. Standing awkwardly in the dark freezing rain, she profusely apologized for carelessly forgetting to strictly give the small drive back. Looking down at her intensely through the rain, he quietly muttered that he was simply returning a debt. Explaining his sudden appearance, he calmly stated he came today because she carried him home previously. Maintaining his stoic composure in the downpour, he bluntly declared that was his only reason. Letting out a startled gasp, she watched helplessly as he turned his broad back to leave. Reaching out frantically into the pouring rain, she desperately screamed for the retreating man to wait. Gripping his wet jacket tightly, she forcefully halted his confident steps with a surge of desperate courage. Remembering his fierce command not to run until winning, she decided that she desperately needed to confront him. Staring directly into his surprised dark eyes, she breathlessly demanded to strictly make sure about what happened before. Holding him firmly in place, she passionately asked what he truly meant when he boldly claimed to be completely serious. Fearing the recent intimate wager was merely a joke, she desperately attempted to maintain some professional distance. She pleaded with him to admit the intense contest was just a meaningless game to tease her. Silence stretched between them as the weight of his unyielding gaze intensified the palpable and heavy atmosphere. He coldly remarked that she was free to believe whatever comforts her fragile and doubting heart tonight. With a sharp and stern tone, he ordered her to abandon that strained and fake-looking smile. She stammered in shock while denying any malicious intent behind her habitual and nervous social smiling response. He accused her of using that hollow laugh to hide her pain so nobody would ever notice. Stepping closer, he declared that if simple words failed to reach her, he would try something else. He vowed to prove her worth repeatedly until she finally believed that her past trauma was baseless. His intense presence filled the small room as he prepared to demonstrate the sincerity of his words. Shadows danced against the wall as the distance between their two hearts began to shrink very rapidly. He persisted in his promise to remain by her side until she could finally offer a genuine. She gasped as he moved with purposeful intent to guide her through the lessons of physical intimacy. He huskily questioned what she thought usually came next after a standard and polite office dinner date. Blushing deeply, she looked at him with wide and confused eyes while trying to process his intent. The air grew warm and heavy with anticipation as he continued to challenge her lack of experience. Her heart hammered against her ribs while she struggled to formulate a coherent answer to his inquiry. She breathlessly admitted her profound ignorance regarding the natural progression of such an intimate romantic relationship today. He pressed further by asking what steps should follow after the initial stage of their romantic connection. He pushed her to contemplate the sequence of affection while her pulse raced with every passing moment. Her heart thundered loudly as she finally dared to suggest that a simple kiss followed the date. He leaned in closer with a knowing expression after hearing her bold admission about their shared attraction. The memory of their previous physical connection resurfaced as he touched her skin with expert, heated precision. He whispered that the next stage of their education involved the gentle art of exploring their bodies. Soft sounds of connection filled the room as he began to lead her into a state of. She moaned softly, overwhelmed by the intense heat radiating from his lips and his remarkably skilled tongue. Their breaths mingled as the atmosphere became saturated with the undeniable and intoxicating scent of mutual passion. He teased her with a low voice, noting how quickly her body responded to his every touch. A sharp, breathless cry escaped her lips as she reached the peak of her swirling sensory pleasure. He remarked with a satisfied smirk that she was truly and uniquely sensitive to his every touch. He marveled that his gentle fingers alone were enough to carry her away into such blissful ecstasy.